I want to say a brief word about who made these decisions. I know that's probably something that's making you a little uncomfortable if you're a person of faith and you start hearing about these councils deciding what books are in and what books are out. Who are the people that are making these decisions? It's really two events in the history of the church that are going to be significant in that regard. In the case of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, we normally talk about the Council of Jamnia, which was convened in AD 90 or CE 90. And it was really focused on, obviously, the Jewish canon, the Jewish, what we think of as the Old Testament. Um, they had those criteria in mind, of course, and at the end of the day, there were some books that struggled to gain acceptance. Song of Songs had a hard time making it in because of its very frank and explicit conversation about human sexuality. Esther, for the reasons that I listed in the other video, had a hard time making it in. At the end of the day, they stayed in the text. And I think that's an important point to make. These Jewish councils that were determining what was canon and what wasn't canon, they were not deciding what gets to go in the Bible. They were deciding what stays. People were reading lots of books. There were lots of things out there. Should we read Ecclesiasticus? Should we read First Maccabees? Should those things, are we basing doctrine off of those things? And it was the Jewish council that came along and said, Esther, yes, Maccabees, no. And we're making those official within Jewish tradition. In the case of the New Testament, it's a little more complicated. The New Testament, there was a local synod or local council at Carthage in 397, so right at the end of the 4th century. And that council endorsed the Easter letter of Athanasius, the early church father, who wrote a letter in which he listed the 27 books that we consider to be canon in the New Testament. So it was a local council that approved those there at the end of the 4th century. Again, for them, really just sort of rubber stamping what Athanasius had said some 30 years before. So as you can see, a lot of time passes after this text are written down and collected before these things are said to be official. The canonization process was a long and complicated process that took place over centuries. The good news is, if you are part of these traditions, this is something that this tradition has wrestled with and worked through. It's not your job to worry about whether or not we should read this text. The church has said these are the texts that are worth reading and these are the texts that are not worth reading. They've made these evaluative judgments over time. And if you want to believe, as I do, that God is at work within these councils, we come to the end of this and say, this is the text, this is special, this is what we are meant to have. And could we have more? Oh, absolutely, I think we could have more. When I think of canonization, I think of very much that line in the end of the Gospel of John where, if we'd written down everything Jesus did, it'd fill all the books of the world, but this is written that you might believe. I think that's the way I look at the canon. Could we have more? Yeah, we could have other letters from Paul. We could have more history books from the Old Testament. We could have a lot of documents. We could have more. But what we have, this is enough, and this is sufficient. This is sufficient enough to make God's point. So hopefully that doesn't cause too much heartburn. Hopefully we can relax a little bit about it and again, have a greater knowledge of where our Bible came from.